I've got the fun session, the session before lunch, although I still believe this is a better session than after lunch. So hopefully I can keep you all awake for just another 30 minutes or so. I know that tummy's probably rumbling, but if you can just hang on for another 30 minutes, that would be fantastic. I'm an ISFJ as a matter of interest, so you don't have to sit here and guess it. I'll give you a couple of little insights into the ISFJ world in a second. I work for Ego Pharmaceuticals. You'll see from the agenda here that I'm going to take you into a little bit about Ego and a little bit about myself, but I won't go into too much detail there. I know that we've got a group predominantly in FPs or something, so I know the agenda may not be that critical for a lot of people here, but as an ISFJ, I just can't help myself. I've got to have some nice little structure to what I do. As a matter of interest, Joe indicated to me that in case this PowerPoint presentation went haywire, I should have a backup USB. Well, I didn't just have one backup. I actually got two backup USBs, Joe. So that gives you a little bit of insight into the ISFJ world. You'll see the agenda here. So what I really want to do today is give you a bit of a framework, whether you're an internal trainer for an organisation or whether you're a consultant working with a number of clients. I want to give you a framework in terms of how you can make this MBTI beast stay alive and healthy and vibrant within an organisation over a longer period of time. Because I think it's one of the real challenges in any organisation, and I'm sure that we've all been in organisations before where they roll out development programs, but those programs just tend to peter away for any number of reasons. You may have a consultant who's only employed for a very short period of time by the company, or it may be that an internal person has actually left the company and they leave all that I guess, intelligence with them. So we've all been there before. I know my 18 years at Ego, I've probably been through half a dozen development programs that in time have just petered out. And it's really unfortunate because companies invest significant amounts of money often in these programs. So the aim of any program at Ego, which includes the MBTI, is to make sure that we've got a program that can stay alive and well and healthy and be vibrant over a long period of time. So what I want to do today is just take you through what I've done with Ego, with this particular program, and where I intend to take it also into the future. All right. How does that sound? Good. Just a little bit about myself. I don't really like talking too much about myself as an ISFJ, but I'll give you a bit of background. I do have a teaching degree. I completed that way back in the early 1990s. Unfortunately, when I came out of teaching, there just wasn't many jobs. I was in Queensland. So it sort of took me down the sales track. I started with Ego way back in 1997. You'll see some of the roles there that I've undertaken. I started as a sales representative in Queensland. I was calling on pharmacies. I did that for quite a number of years. Then I got promoted to a half and half role, a half role that was key accounts, looking after major groups. One of those groups is Terry White, which is based in Queensland. And the other half of my role was actually calling on specialists such as dermatologists, paediatricians and the like. I did that for a few years and then I was promoted to the sales manager's role, the Queensland manager, and I managed a team there of about a dozen people for 7 years. And then was promoted to the role I'm in now, which is the sales trainer role. And as a result of that role, I moved from Queensland down to Victoria, and I've really enjoyed that particular role. You'll see there that I've also had a bit of a role with the Singapore team. In fact, Singapore's taken up quite a lot of my time the last few months in a caretaking management role. I was certified into the program in November 2011, 4 years ago, Martin. Goes very, very quickly. So that's a little bit about where I come from. This is my desk at work at the moment. I don't know how clearly you can see that, but you might see a whole lot of bits of paper on the wall there. And that is, I guess, our little 16-room house. And what I have there, which you can't see, is people's names in all of those little rooms. And I've done the Myers-Briggs program with a lot of different departments within Ego, and also within the sales team, we have teams in different states that we've put the little houses together for. And anytime I get a phone call from anyone in the organisation, if I can't remember their type, I've got a quick reminder. But it's, I live and breathe this particular tool, which is why I'm really excited and passionate to be talking to you about it today. That's a little bit about Ego. So I don't know how many people are familiar with Ego Pharmaceuticals. We're a dermatological company. We specialise mainly in therapeutic products, a little bit of cosmetic products. We started back in 1953. All of our products are made here in Melbourne, You know, we're a bit of a rarity in the Australian pharmaceutical landscape in that we actually develop and make our own products, and we're very, very proud of that. We employ over 450 staff, and that number is growing rapidly. And a lot of that is our teams overseas. So, you know, I think there's an estimate we're going to have something like 600 staff within the next couple of years. So we're a company that's really growing. So that's just a little bit about Ego. I remember when I was looking for material on this presentation, I came up with just this quote: "Coming together is the beginning, staying together is the success." And this really encapsulates what this particular presentation is all about, because this is about creating a long-term presence. And, you know, when we launch the Myers-Briggs program with our teams, that is just the beginning. All right, but if we can't keep this program alive or any other program alive for a long period of time, then it's almost pointless. So, you know, the Myers-Briggs is only one of a number of programs that I run within the company, but every program that we run, whether it's a selling skills program or presentation skills programs, we make sure that we continue to layer stuff on top of these programs frequently so that we reinforce the learning, and we also set up processes within the company to make sure that the skills are being applied. So I'm going to take you through a bit more about how we manage that as we go on through. So a bit about Myers-Briggs. I launched it with our sales team back in February 2012. So this is only a couple of months after I was certified. For us, it's our relationship building tool. So when people ask me about what Myers-Briggs, what's the purpose of it in our organisation, it's simply for us, it's our relationship building tool. It's the tool we use to enable our sales reps to gain better connections and better relationships with our customers so that we can drive our business forward with them. In the launch, we had about 60 participants, predominantly sales, but in our conferences at Ego, we have all of our sales and marketing team together. So at that time, the 60 participants were members of our sales and marketing team. I'm very fortunate in that I get access to our complete and entire sales team twice a year for conferences. And that's when I deliver all of these backup sessions and all of these layering sessions for Myers-Briggs and some of the other programs that we run. Since the launch, I've ran 5 additional sessions with our entire sales team, most of them around about the 3-hour mark. So normally they give me about half a day to do the sort of sessions that I need. So these 5 additional sessions were with our entire sales team at subsequent conferences after our openings. The other thing that I do is I do inductions. So anyone who starts with the organisation in our sales department are part of their induction program is the Myers-Briggs program. So I'm forever inducting new people into the organisation as well. So what I'm going to do is just take you through some of the sessions. And this is really broad level. I'm not going to discuss every single bit that I've done in all these sessions, but I'm going to give you an overall view of just exactly what we did cover. Now this is a bit of a snapshot of it here. So the first session down the bottom there was the introduction, which included the splitting exercises. I really love the splitting exercises with Myers-Briggs. For those that just aren't quite sure where they sit in some of these preferences, the splitting exercises are very helpful in helping them come to the realisation of what they may be. So the very first program was the introduction and splitting exercises. As a matter of interest, I did 2 half days on that with our launch with Ego. Second session, I wanted to take them a bit further. So now that they developed an understanding of Myers-Briggs, what I wanted them to do was then be able to identify traits and preferences in others. So how do we do that? And then once they've identified those preferences and traits, how do they need to modify their behaviour and their actions to make a connection with people? The third session was about Myers-Briggs and selling. Obviously, we're a sales organisation, and CPP have a wonderful book on the Myers-Briggs and selling, which was partly the basis for that first session around MBTI and selling. One of the great sessions we ran was on perceptions and self-awareness, because I think there's a lot of people out there that know what type they are. I think most of us like to think that we're good people and that we come across well to others, but a lot of us have very, very little self-awareness of how our actions and the way that we actually conduct ourselves is perceived by others. So I really did quite a session on that. The fifth session there was a checking in exercise, and I really loved this one. This is where I got everybody to basically send me a 1-minute video on their iPhones. And what it was telling me what they'd gained from the program to date. Now, some of them had been there for 4 years, some of them had been there for 12 months and maybe only done 1 or 2 sessions. but I found this to be a really, really useful exercise, and it really reinforced that the benefits we were hoping to gain from the program we certainly were getting. We then did a second subsequent session on MBTI and selling, and the 7th session is actually coming up in a couple of months. Not 100% certain what I'm covering yet, but I've got a few ideas. Okay, the aim of every session, I see it this way. I mean, everyone has a basis of knowledge at the moment. So the big blue thing there, the puzzle you see there, is where we're at. So we have a base of knowledge that everyone's got. My aim with every session is to add another piece. And that's as I see it. So we add another piece so that each time that I'm with them, they gain more and more, and their understanding of the program and their ability to apply it is enhanced. So what I'm going to take you through, first of all, just very quickly, most of us in this room have done introductions and splitting exercises with people. I like to add my own little diagrams to a lot of the descriptors that have come through from CPP's own work. So I think, most of our learners are visual, about 65 to 70%. So I do like to add pictures that sort of just demonstrate what I'm trying to say effectively. So there's an example of a difference in our thinking and feeling dichotomy, just one of the statements. And I really enjoyed the splitting exercises. I know this is one that probably a lot of us have used in terms of especially looking at how we look at things differently, especially from an S&N perspective when you look at a piece of art like this, an abstract piece of art. So I ran quite a number of different splitting exercises, which I found to be particularly useful with our team. I don't need to go too much into the introduction because, as I think a lot of us have done it in this room. The second session was a really fun session, and I actually started with this one. I actually interviewed quite a lot of our sales team, and I got them to say to me, tell me about yourself. What are the sort of things you like to do in your life? Tell me a bit about yourself. And I interviewed people, and I made lots of notes. And then what I'd do is I'd actually get some of these people, and I'd put their profile up in the bottom, and I'd describe some of the things they said back to me. And as I was putting it up on the screen, what would happen is you'd see a revolving indicator as to which part of their actual personality was pertaining to what they talked about. So, for example, you might have had someone who says, listen, I'm a stickler for detail. They're an ISFJ type, so, I'd make sure that was pertaining to the S. So we did a lot of that work. So in other words, let's have a look at people's habits and what they do, and let's see where it actually is attributed to their Myers-Briggs type. But then what we also did is, this was a session around identifying preferences and traits in others. So we actually used celebrities for this, which was a really interesting exercise. And it did create some diversity of opinion, well and truly. However, there was a lot of people that were very much in agreement with the traits of a lot of these people. And I think as you see some of these, all of a sudden, straight away, you're probably thinking, well, I think that person's an ESTJ, or whatever the case may be. All right, now, some of the things that we identified may be correct, some of them may not be, because in all of these cases, we're really seeing the public persona, which in many cases can be very different to the personal. I thought just as a bit of fun, I'd chuck Darth Vader in there as well. I did get some people, however, thought that Darth Vader was an F-type. And I did say that if you kill someone, you probably are not an F-type. Although if you know Star Wars, it's all about Anakin Skywalker, and he's a lovely fellow in the end and all that sort of stuff. But anyhow, we had a lot of fun with that particular exercise. So what we did as a result of that, we said, okay, what is it that makes us look at someone and think that they're a particular preference? So what is it that makes us think that that person is an intuitive type or a feeling type or a thinking type? So these are the sort of things we identified that we ourselves actually look at. We look at people's verbal cues. How quick do they talk? Do they speak loudly or softly? What's the tone of their voice? We can, gain lots of information from just looking at the way that people speak, the verbal cues. As we can from non-verbal cues as well, people's posture. There's lots of stuff we can pick up from people non-verbally. Their general demeanour. If you had a look at the bloke in the diagram there in the middle there, it may give you some indication as to some potential preference types there. Also looking at people's actions. I think people's actions tell us a lot about who they are and what their preferences may be. You'll see the diagram there on the right. It says, you are special, yes you. That was actually written, sent via one of our internal communications by one of our merchandisers, Sandy. Sandy's a very high F. She loves this sort of stuff, sending stuff to people to make them feel better about themselves. So, that's, when you see people doing that, it gives you some sort of indication as to what some of their preferences may actually be. So what we actually did as a group in this particular session is we identified some traits of each of the preferences. All right, this came from the people themselves. This wasn't something that I spoon-fed them, although I did assist in the process of getting this final list put together for them. So once we identified the traits, some of the traits of these types, then what do we actually do to actually communicate with them? So we came up with a list of traits, but then more importantly, or just as importantly, was some communication tips. And again, as a group of people within groups, we came up with some of this information. So what I generally had was different groups working on different preference types. So some were working on I, some on E, some on S, some on N, and so on. So you'll see some of the communication tips that we came up with when you're actually dealing with introverts. I won't go through all of those, you can see that, but this is particularly important, I think, as extroverts working with introverts, some of the things you have to consider. But even when we're working with people the same, sometimes we still have to consider these things. Also, what I did as a result of this session, this again is pulling on some of the material from CPP, was we developed some forms that they could use. So in other words, if our sales reps were out with customers and they were wanting to try and identify their personality types, and this is something that they could use to help them out. So they could put a few ticks in a few boxes which might help them actually identify the sort of types they're dealing with. And once they've identified those types, then what are some action points? So for example, if I've identified that someone's an ESTJ, then what are some of the things that I might need to do on each one of those dichotomies? As an extrovert, I might need to pick up my pace, show more enthusiasm, exhibit more energy. If it's a T-type, it's something I might need to be a bit more focused on the task, be wary of too much social interaction. If it's a J-type, I've got to make sure that I'm on time. I've got to provide structure. So there's some action points that come out of all of these things once I've identified the types of the important customers they're dealing with. All right, so session number 3 was around MBTI and selling, and I've got to admit, I really love this. When I read the book, Type and Selling, it was quite interesting because Myers-Briggs themselves actually came up with the stages of the selling process. Now, the amazing thing about this is that it mirrored completely the selling program that we actually use at Ego. Now, we don't use those particular terms, but our selling skills program is a program called Professional Selling Skills. And with Professional Selling Skills, it identifies 4 stages of a sales call, which are basically exactly the same. So for PSS, initiating the relationship, we call that opening. So that's when you open a call. Investigating needs, we call that probing or investigating, where you ask lots of questions. You find out what the needs of your customers are. And once you've done that, then you can suggest a course of action. We call that the supporting phase in PSS world. And then you obtain agreement and close. For us, that's closing. So this was exactly what our own selling skills program was. But the great thing about this session is it looked at, okay, what are some parts of the personality profile are more prevalent and important at different phases of the sales call. So I don't know how many of you have actually used the selling module, the selling book, the Type and Selling book, but this is what they go over. So it basically indicated that when you're opening a call, when you're meeting someone, a customer, then you specifically, especially have to look after the E and I dichotomy. This is about matching energy levels. All right, so it's about making that connection, which you need to do really immediately in a sales call. Once you get into the meat of a sales call, where you're asking the questions, you're establishing the needs, and then you're supporting those needs, then the areas of the S and N dichotomy and the T and F become quite prevalent. And then in closing, J and P becomes critical. The J types are more likely to want to close really, really quickly. They have a sense of urgency in the way they operate. They want to close things. But they might be dealing with a P customer that wants more information, that wants to take their time. All right, they may not want to make a decision today. So you have to be able to meet them on that particular relevant level. Now, I actually got our team to come up with this first. I didn't just show them. I actually got them in groups to come up with what they believed were the most important parts of the MBTI profile in the different phases of a call. But the great thing was, in almost every group came up with exactly that, which was great because it showed me that they really have an understanding of the program. So I found this to be particularly useful. And this was our first selling session. The other thing I did at the very end of this session is we just gave an example. We had a new product we launched at this particular conference. And what I actually did was got a few of the groups to actually look at, okay, how would we sell this product to the different types? So we had some groups working on selling that product, for example, to an ST type or an SN type. An ST type or an SF type or an NT or an NF. So we looked at the function pairs predominantly. And that was particularly useful because we're all creatures of habit. We sell in particular ways and we sell in ways which are pertaining to our own personalities. But one of the real challenges for a lot of our sales reps has been actually trying to sell differently and sell differently to different people, because you can't use the same approach and expect to get the same results with everyone. So this was a real eye-opener because some of our guys actually really struggled with this, really struggled in terms of how do I sell this particular product to someone that's really totally the opposite of me in terms of that function pair. So that was sort of towards the end of this session. So I found this session is especially to be really, really useful. We gained a lot from that. And this is another session I particularly liked. And I think this session came about because whilst a lot of our salespeople knew what type they were and were aware of some of their own characteristics and the way that they behaved, one thing I don't think a lot of them are aware of is just how they're perceived by others. All right, and as I said, I think mostly most of us would like to think we're good people and our type is fantastic and, the way that I operate is good and, I make great connections with people. But some people really don't have much awareness in terms of how they're perceived by others. So what we did with this one is we talked about the feeling that your perceptions can be completely different. The way you think you are is completely different the way others do. It's a bit like, as you can see, the cat with the lion. But also the way that we look at things are different. Some of you may be familiar with these famous images where, all of us are seeing different things. I also use an example of a celebrity. The celebrity I used in this session was Miley Cyrus. And I got people to actually sort of indicate what their thoughts of Miley Cyrus were. And again, the perceptions were completely different and varied across the room. So it was done to illustrate the fact that, we have different perceptions and the way that people perceive us is really important, especially in a selling environment. So what I wanted to do is show them that some of the traits of all of these preferences can be seen actually in a negative light by others. All right, so you might be an extrovert and be very sociable, but for some people that sociability is actually seen as you're actually a space invader. Although I'm sure that none of the extroverts in here are space invaders. For the introverts, their trait of being reflective, thoughtful, can be seen as being potentially indecisive by others. Sensing types, being detail-minded, might be overly analytical, or anal, sometimes that's called. So I think I wrote that down on one of my little things. The imaginative people are often seen, especially by the sensing types, as dreamers, and I think we've all heard that. They're in dreamland, what they're proposing isn't real, it's unrealistic. The thinking types that are very honest and frank in their approach, well, that's just seen as cold and detached to others. So I can go on and on and on, but there is a negative perception that comes with a lot of these traits. And what I wanted to do is to make sure that everybody in the room, no matter what their preference was, were aware of what some of these negative perceptions could potentially be. And what they needed to do to address that, to ensure that some of this negativity wasn't the way that they were being perceived, especially from their really important customers, that it was important that they really build those relationships, to take the sales and the relationship further. So what I actually did here too is, you might remember this from one of the previous sessions where we had the traits written down. So in groups again, I gave them these sheets and I got them to write down the negative perceptions potentially for all of these traits. All right, so we did that across all of the groups, and then that was presented back to the total group. And then what I got people to do was to write down on the left-hand columns there what their type was, I, S, F, J, and to write some of those pitfalls or negative perceptions attuned to each of them, so that each person came out of that session knowing that, okay, here are some of the potential pitfalls and negative perceptions of my type, all right, with each preference. There was a bit of an eye-opener, to be honest, for a lot of people. And a lot of people came back to me at the end of the session and said that was fantastic, that, you know, they really gained a lot from the session, and some of those perceptions they felt were probably real, that at times they could have come across this particular way, and they were going to work on trying to modify their behaviour and the way that they came across with people to try and get a better connection. So again, a really good session. Checking in, I really love this session, and to be honest with you, when I first put this presentation together, I had a lot more examples, and due to time I just had to cut a lot of them out. But this is the one where I got everyone to send in a 1-minute video. It's interesting, quite a lot of people had difficulty even doing that. They were really sort of, oh, geez, I don't know if I want to do that. And in some cases, I had to really ring the people and say, listen, this is what I need you to do, and this is the benefit you're going to get from it, and the benefit your peers are going to get from it. So in some cases, I really had to sort of contact people to try and really ease their minds about this particular exercise. But everyone ended up sending a video in. And we spent a couple of hours on this, on reflection. Where are we at right now after a couple of years of doing Myers-Briggs, and what have we gained from it to date? And this is a real insight into what people are gaining. I've just got a couple of little examples here. Demelza from our marketing team said, I feel like I can be more supportive and customise the way that I interact with colleagues so that we can work together in a mutually beneficial way. I've got 100 of these, which is fantastic. I love it, because when people want to talk to me about the benefits of MBTI, this is some of the stuff I roll out. I say, listen, don't believe me, here's what our people are actually saying. So some people actually commented from a general perspective, and others got down a little bit deeper into the dichotomies. So I'll give you one from Stephanie in our marketing team, which I really, really liked. And she works very closely with another marketing colleague called Lauren. They work closely together. So she says, Lauren is a high S and I am a high N. I can see the frustration she has with my great big picture ideas. I'm really working hard to put a bit more meat on the bones of those big ideas. I really love that one, because an intuitive dealing with S-type, you really need to do that. All right, and these two, Lauren and Stephanie, work particularly well together, and yet they're complete opposites, I think, on every dichotomy. But it goes to show that opposites can still work really, really well together, because the strengths of one, is balanced by the weaknesses of another, and between the two of them, they work extremely effectively together because they have different strengths. So as I said, I've got 100 of these. Unfortunately, I've only got time to discuss 2 of them with you. But it was a great exercise. The feedback was so positive. But the great thing that I loved, and you can see it from the comments there, is that people were commenting in the right context. To me, it showed that they have an understanding of the tool and the instrument. And from my perspective, it was a great measurement tool for me, because I'm sure I'm going to get asked by people, how do you actually measure whether the Myers-Briggs has actually been effective in terms of, affecting your sales? This is one of the ways that I can actually tell, and this was one of the reasons why I did it, because I really wanted to get feedback, really tangible feedback on how people were going and what they were gaining from the Myers-Briggs instrument to date. So that check-in session I really enjoyed. We then did another session on MBTI and selling, and what I did with this session is I focused on the world of advertising. Advertising and selling is so similar. In the advertising world, you have a product to sell, and you want to sell it to a particular target market, and you have strategies for that. So advertising and selling is very similar. So what I did for this particular session was I actually played 8 different car commercials, back to back. And I got these commercials from all over the world. And the other thing I did is I took everybody's function pair, all right, so whether they were ST or SF or NT or NF, and they actually had to write it down on a little plate. So what we did is I played all the ads. I said to people, rate the ads any way you want, but at the end of it, I want you to tell me your top 2 ads. Now, it wasn't necessarily the 2 ads they enjoyed the most. It was the 2 ads that would influence them to buy that car. So that was the criteria. What 2 cars would you buy based on looking at those commercials? So what they did is rated their top 2. So at the end of it, once we'd played all the ads, people had filled out all of this, I then went through each of the ads and I got people to stand up and tell me whether this was one of their top 2. And as they did it, we could see whether there was some correlation between the function pairs and the ad they liked. Now, I knew that this could have gone pear-shaped because you could have had some commercials where you had all the different dichotomies. And I kind of expected it with 1 or 2 of those commercials. But in reality, this actually went really the way I wanted it to. So some ads, the Audi one, for example, was just an ad where you see a car, this Audi in a lovely sort of a showroom with the engine revving for about a minute, and then at the end, all you see on the screen is evolution on the outside, revolution on the inside. Some of these ads said nothing about the car whatsoever. Some of them were very detailed. You might see the 1965 Arcadian. In the old days, we tended to want to tell everybody everything about the car, so there was lots and lots of detail in the Arcadian, which I thought would specifically sort of be attractive to our sensing types in particular, who like the detail. The Holden one, the second last one, number 7, there was also quite a lot of detail on that one. All right, so I really thought that would be an ST type ad, to be honest, because there was lots of detail and, you know, they were really sort of trying to get into the logic. This is a logical car to buy. Look at all these great things that it does. And I know when we played that ad and we got people to stand up, there was a huge amount of STs in the room that stood up for that particular ad. The Dodge one, as a matter of interest, was one that was played during the Super Bowl this year. A really highly emotive ad. An American serviceman, someone who's come back from the war and is just wanting to go out on a drive with his son. Really emotive stuff. And again, the people who stood up for that were predominantly the F-types in the room. All right, so there were some real correlations that I expected to see. So again, it was a great exercise. The other thing that I did is I showed them, on each table, I put 10 magazine clippings. And I got them to pick the particular magazine that the clipping came from. Because even the magazines and the adverts they have, the adverts have a certain language that really is designed for that target audience that they have in mind. So the whole advertising thing was just a really effective tool. So those particular exercises, apart from being a lot of fun and enjoyable, really were, you know, we gained a lot from it. So we talked about target audiences, and then I said to you that you guys, when you're out in the road and you're face-to-face with your customers, your target audience is that customer. That's your target audience. So what are you going to do to make that connection with that particular person? This is also from the Type and Selling book. All right, so that just gave them some practical tips. If you're dealing with an ST type, this is what you need to consider. If it's SF, NF, and NT, and then down the bottom, you'll just see one really key takeaway. So if you're dealing with an ST type, then state the facts. Our ST types like the facts. All right, SFs, give them personal service. Our SFs, I can tell you from personal experience that SFs love that personal service. So this was just some things that we wanted them to take away in terms of how they needed to deal with each of these different function pairs. And then again, what we did is something similar to what I did previously, in that we got them to sell, each group to sell a new product to a very specific type. So group 1 had to sell the QV oil there to an ST type, and so on. So this was about taking our new products that we just launched and selling them to a very specific type, and each group had to work on a different scenario. Okay, what's next? Not 100% certain. Just very, very quickly, some of the activities. I just want to mention 2. In the second session that I ran, we actually played a game called Pick That Personality Trait. I had a table in the middle that had 96 traits, all laminated. So there was 12 traits for each of the 8 preferences. Each group had a leader. What they had to do is a leader asked them a question regarding Myers-Briggs. If they answered it right, they had to go into the middle of the table, come back out again, and make sure they applied that particular trait to the right preference. So for example, each table, the 8 tables, each were representing a preference type. So we had an E table, an I table, an S table, and so on. So that E table had to go in, answer the question right, pick a trait that was synonymous with ease, with extroverts, bring it back, and if they were right, the leader would say, yes, you've got it right. They'd ask the next question, they'd go in for the next trait, and it was the group that finished first. And we had all sorts of game show music, and I and I got some of our other people in the organisation to play, the part of, the presenters. It was, a good lot of fun. And something I like to do is I love to use music. Music is really deeply emotive. We have a lot of auditory learners that love music. Music can be highly emotive and really get people engaged. So what we did, and this is the beginning of the third session, is I played 15 tracks. I didn't play the full track. I played about a minute from each track. In each of the groups, what they had to do was identify the song title, the artist, and the MBTI type that related to the song title. So, Space Invaders, for example, can't remember the artist, but that should have been relating probably to, I'm sorry, extroverts in the room, I know there's lots of you, but that can be an extroverted thing. And some of this was a little bit taking the mickey, which you've got to do. You've got to have a bit of fun with these things. Cold as Ice. Who's Foreigner fans here? That's one of my favourite songs, Cold as Ice. Sorry, Tease. Sorry about that. A bit of fun. Don't Stand So Close to Me. Police. Possibly an I thing. Dreamer. I love that one. For our intuitive types. Praise You for our F types. A little less conversation for our introverts, and so on. So this was a really fun exercise, and people really got into that. And we did the exercising activities that I showed you. So very quickly, application. Are you guys familiar with this particular model? And I really strongly believe this. And I say to people that when I'm up talking to you, if you are going to truly take something away from my presentations, I can only take 10% of the credit. Really, if people are going to take MBTI and learn from it and improve their relationships, then they have to be using it. So the application on the job is critical. And the great thing with Ego is we have field supervisors in all of our states who go out and they assess our reps in terms of all this sort of stuff. So they're getting the 20%. They're regularly getting the feedback. They're applying it all the time. So we made sure that we had processes in place to ensure this happened. One thing you'll see here is that our sales automation system that our reps use, or our CRMs, as you might be aware of, our customer relationship tools, so they have, iPads and phones, and they have to make notes on all of their customers in terms of what they did and what they said and what orders they took and all that sort of stuff. We use Salesforce, all right, and on our Salesforce system, we put this particular template in. I designed this one. This was to be used by our managers and field supervisors. So when they go out in the field, they can tick off what people are doing. So I know you probably can't read that. So for extroversion, for example, did they provide an appropriate level of energy to match the customer? So there's whole lots of stuff there around each of the dichotomies. So our field managers can go out in the road, they can have the discussions, they can tick the boxes, and that is sent to the sales rep, and I get to see it myself. So at all times, I can see the comments that are being made in the field from our field supervisors, which also gives me an indication as to whether they have an understanding of Myers-Briggs. So we have the processes in place to make sure that the skills are being applied and that our managers are in a position where they're skilled enough to identify all this sort of stuff and have the conversation with people. This is a critical part of the Myers-Briggs in Ego, because they have to be applying it to really get the benefit from it, and they need to be getting feedback. And in terms of spreading the word, it's just amazing. I did not approach any of these other departments at Ego. I'm employed by the sales department. So I initially, of course, did the introductions with the sales and marketing team. But in time, I had all these other departments approach me. The QC team, quality control, scientific affairs, IT, the international department, our marketing services team, our wholesale team. Our managing director, the owner of the business, talks Myers-Briggs all the time. So the languaging is unbelievable. The embedding of this program in our organisation is something I'm really proud of, because we speak the language, and that language has just become rampant across the whole organisation, to the stage now where I've done multiple sessions now with most of those departments. And this gives you a bit of a look at some of the desks and around the offices at Ego. I mean, especially I love these heads and stuff. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with them. So you can sort of see the different traits of each of the personality types. So we've got our ISFJ sitting there at their desk, and that's their traits at the top, and this is the stresses. So in other words, what stresses me out? And a lot of our people have these posted up all around their bench spaces at work. And again, I'm just really, really proud of what we've achieved there, because it really shows again to me that people take this seriously. So they not only take it seriously, but they want the people around them to make sure that they're, you know, behaving in an appropriate way to sort of, I guess, meet their needs. So just a couple of quick tips and then I'm done for the day. This is about embedding Myers-Briggs in the organisation for the long term. So what I've got here is just a couple of tips. So whether you're a consultant working with a client, whether you're an internal trainer, I've taken you through some of the ways that you can continue to layer sessions on. But this is just some quick tips. Develop a long-term plan. Nobody's doing anybody any favours if you go in and work for an organisation and you deliver an introduction to Myers-Briggs and that's it. And I'm sure most of you would never want to do that. As consultants, you wanted to go in and have a longer-term relationship with a client, because we know it's critical in cementing that learning and making sure that people really are applying the skills and getting the benefit from a relationship-building point of view. And if you, in some cases, you really need to sell the plan. Say, this is not just about the introduction, but I need to make sure that I come in and I work with your team once or twice a year for the course of the next few years, so that we can embed these skills, so that you'll get the benefits, increased productivity in sales and all those sorts of things. So ensure a longer-term presence is part of any agreement that you sign if you're in a position to do that. All right, really important, because you want to be there for the longer term, not just deliver something once or twice. And explore opportunities to go wider and deeper. As I said, I've managed to do that in my company, not through pursuing it, having others come to me, because if it's done well, the word gets out, the language is used. I mean, you know, we've got people in our organisation that say, John, every time I see someone, they're talking about that's such a T thing to do or an F thing to do, or, you know, be aware of, that you've got a whole team of J's and you need to consider this. So it's really become part of the languaging of our organisation. So that's just a few little tips.